Any motions to accept that agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Sullivan, thank you. Mr. Huntington, thank you. Any comments, concerns?
Do we have copies of the revised minutes?
They were, I believe, emailed out.
They were emailed. We don't
Yeah.
have hard copies here.
I don't have mine here,
That's
but
okay.
I saw it
seen
came
them.
out.
I just want to make sure.
It came out in an email
everybody's aware
today.
There's a
Yep.
revised set.
Yep. So with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to presentations. At this time tonight, I see we have Boy Scout Troop 9328 is here tonight, and I want to welcome you all here. You've got something you'd like to present to the city. I want to start by, before you guys start, that we do have two Eagle Scouts here. Councilmember Huntington's an Eagle Scout, as am myself. So we understand the importance of scouting and all the merits that come with it. So at this time, if you guys can have the floor. I see it's on.
Yeah, just kind of stand up.
And if you don't mind introducing yourself, please.
Hello, I am Owen Grayson. I am the senior patrol leader for Boy Scout Troop 9328. Before I begin, though, let me introduce you to everyone else in our troop that could make it tonight. I'm Zayden Snow.
I'm Liam West.
I'm Bronson Snow. I'm Michael Rodriguez. I'm William Zachary.
I'm Zachary Weckworth.
And I'm Lonnie Weckworth. I'm the Scoutmaster.
We would now like to present the City Council with plaque as thanks from us for your ongoing support of our troop during the lock-in at the community center and the many other times in the past when you have supported us.
Thank you very much. Thanks with a plaque to the city, Northern Star Council, Boy Scouts, for our troop support, Boy Scout Troop 9328. Board of the City Council, members of Sueur, Minnesota, January 2022. Gentlemen, I want to thank you.
And along with this plaque, we would like to offer our support whenever you are in need of help with a service project or an issue. And thank you again for helping our troop and continue to keep us in mind for upcoming service projects.
Thank you, gentlemen. Hey, before you guys are done, I know you all introduced yourselves. Why don't you tell us what all your ranks are?
I am a first class scout. I'm first class.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Scout.
Scout, okay. Scout.
They just crossed over.
Yeah.
I understand. Well, I want to wish you all well. You guys hang. Oh, we missed somebody?
Life.
We've got a life. Okay. Well, gentlemen, thank you. And I want to encourage you to stay on the trail to Eagle Scout. It's a wonderful program and you're going to have lots of fun in the future. And thank you again very much for the award. We'll display it proudly in the city council office. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And you gentlemen are welcome to stick around for the meeting. It'll be a great civics lesson for you. Moving on to the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and have been made available to the city council at least 2 days in advance of the meeting. The items will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the agenda and considered in normal sequence. At this time, I'm going to ask our interim administrator, Mr. Roby, to go over those with us if you would. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mayor Kirby. On today's consent agenda, we have approval of the city council minutes from the March 28th, 2022 meeting, approval of disbursements through April 11th, 2022, and those include, one moment here, just to highlight a couple of the significant purchases, the payment of our 2022 city property taxes, payment for our 2022 liability, casualty, and auto insurance to the League of Minnesota Cities, and payment of our March 2022 purchase power from MMPA Avant Energy. Next, we have acceptance of the bid for the 2005 case skid loader. The city staff did sealed bids to try to garner a little bit additional value for the used equipment that the city had deemed surplus. So acceptance of the bid to sell that to John Burns. Next is approval of the payment application number 7 to Magny Construction for a well aid project. Item E, establish Veterans Memorial Task Force. Council members should have a memo from Public Services Director Rich Kuchera on this, and this is part of our Parks, Open Spaces, and Trails plan. As part of that, the Veterans Memorial is planned to move from its current location to an area closer to the intersection of Ferry Street and South Park Lane. The Veterans Memorial Task Force specifically would be to provide a recommendation to City Council as to a final design and location for the memorial. And the task force membership as proposed will consist of Shannon Frost, John May, Brian Farr, Billy Schultz, Larry Brender, Tyler Sunderman, and Shane Sennell. All members of our community with record of membership in our armed services. And item F, to accept donations to the Sueur Fire Department. We had a number of fire department donations that came in over the past number of months, and we'd ask that council approve those and accept those donations.
Thank you. Anybody have any question on any of those items for interim city administrator? If not, if there's no questions, I would entertain a motion to pass the consent agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Krogman. Seconded by Councilmember Swanberg. Any discussion, concerns, comments? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to public comment. At this time, public comment provides an opportunity for the public to address the council on items that are not on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per person. Persons wishing to make a comment must sign in advance of the meeting on a sheet provided and identify themselves by providing their name and address. At this time, we have nobody who wants to address the council, so we will move ahead from there. Item number 8A, the bond reimbursement resolution. Mr. Roby, you want to help us out with that?
Thank you, Mayor Kirby. What the council has in front of it this evening is a resolution regarding bond proceed reimbursement. So for those on council last year, you'll recall that council approved a resolution that allowed the city to reimburse itself with bond proceeds for expenses made prior to the issuance of the bond. So the IRS allows municipalities to reimburse itself. So for example, if we don't sell a bond until October, for example, but we make purchases toward that project in the months leading up to October, passing of a resolution allowing for reimbursement allows the city to then take those bond proceeds and reimburse itself and basically consider those expenses as part of the bond project. Now, in the past, City Council has approved resolutions, unique resolutions for each bond issuance. In consultation with Shannon Sweeney from David Drown, our bond consultant, the recommendation here is actually a proposed resolution that would authorize the city administrator or delegate to complete the appropriate IRS paperwork in anticipation of bond issuances. What this would do is it would no longer then require City Council to pass an individual resolution for each potential bonded project. Instead, the city administrator would be granted the ability to fill out the official intent declaration of intent or intent declaration and file that paperwork with the bond project so that if the IRS were to ever audit bond expenditures, the appropriate paperwork is in hand. This resolution does not bind council to go out and issue bonds. It's more or less a function of IRS regulations. So instead of council issuing a resolution saying for the CASA 36 bond and subsequent or related projects, we hereby resolve to reimburse the city for expenditures for the CASA 36 work when those bond proceeds are receipted. This would simply say the city administrator has the ability and the authority to file the appropriate paperwork with the bond packet in anticipation of the city issuing debt in the future.
So is this more compliance with the IRS and also? Is it kind of, it's something they expect us to do?
So what the IRS requires is if the city's going to reimburse itself with bond proceeds, either the city council has to adopt a resolution such as this that allows the city administrator to proactively complete that paperwork, or as we did with the CASA 22 project, or the Main Street project for that matter, city council would issue a resolution or approve a resolution specifically stating this is the bond that we expect to issue with the estimated costs, and we hereby resolve to reimburse ourselves.
I think I understand. Any other questions from anybody?
Mayor Kirby?
Yeah, go ahead.
Joe, is this, if we pass this tonight, is that something that has to be redone every year? Or is this like a permanent fix that essentially gives the power to the city administrator?
It's effectively permanent. So it could be, in theory, rescinded at some point if the council so chose. And the expectation would still be that, as council, as the opportunity comes up for council to hear updates on certain projects, city administrator would at that time say, this is what we've spent so far. We've already completed the paperwork. So for example, for CASA 36, for any underground electrical work, this would allow the city administrator to complete that paperwork and then update council in the future. These are the expenses that we've already incurred on these projects. And it's in some respects a formality. It's just a matter of how council would like to handle it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution R 2022-019, authorizing city administrator to complete official intent declaration for future debt reimbursements.
So moved.
We have a motion made by Councilmember Sullivan, seconded by Councilmember Huntington. Any discussion, comments, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on to Fund 615 Financial Reporting Resolution. Mr. Roby, you want to help us out with that, please?
Thank you, Mayor Kirby. Yes. So in the city's accounting system and its general ledger, the city maintains the community center operations under fund number 615. Just for some context, the general fund of the city is Fund 101. The fire department is Fund 225. So the city's ledger is broken out into these larger fund categories to account for revenues and expenditures. The community center resides within Fund 615. The resolution at the table tonight is not a resolution, just to be clear, is not a resolution to dissolve Fund 615. It is simply a resolution that would, for financial reporting purposes, when the city's audit is complete, to consider Fund 615 a part of the general fund. So when the auditors report our final financial statements for a given financial year, they will roll funds such as 101 and 225, the fire department, and 235, the airport, into general fund operations, meaning they're the general operations of the city, not independently self-sufficient like our utility funds would be, for example. Historically, Fund 615, the community center, has been held entirely separately from the general fund. So we've reported on our general fund operations, our electric operations, our water operations, our wastewater, storm and refuse operations, and the community center. Given the fund balance concerns over the community center and given the amount of general levy dollars that go to support the community center operations, it's been the recommendation of the city's audit firm, Bergen KDV, to include Fund 615 as part of the general fund when doing reporting. It won't take anything away from our ability to track community center operations. It simply will include Fund 615 when reporting on the city's overall financial health.
And I want to reiterate, this is the recommendation of our auditing firm, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Any other questions, concerns? Anybody?
This just makes perfect sense to me. I don't understand why it hasn't been that way in the past, but I know there's a reason for it. And I appreciate that the auditor has recommended this solution because now it makes sense to me.
Good.
Yeah, sure. So, in theory, when a city has an operation such as the community center or like our water operation or electric operation that generates its own revenues outside of a tax levy, a separate fund could or would be set up for that. And the community center does, to be clear, generate its own revenues through memberships and things like that. But given the amount of support that the general tax levy puts into the community center right now, it makes sense financially to consider the community center no longer a separately reportable entity.
But we're still going to be able to see everything.
Absolutely.
So it's still going to be transparent.
Correct. We did have the conversation several months ago with the auditors around whether it would make sense or whether it was required actually to effectively dissolve 615 and add it into Fund 101. And my hope, and at the time City Administrator Krugel's hope, was that we would not have to do that because it's easier to keep it separately reportable for internal purposes if it remains a 615. Just for some additional context, within Fund 101, we have separate departments for our police department, separate department for our public works, streets. City Council has its own department. Joint Services has its own. I mean, so we have lots of granularity within Fund 101, but it still at the end of the day ends up being part of Fund 101. So instead of creating a separate department for community center, we're going to keep it as 615 so we can track, at a more granular level what goes on in community center. But ultimately it will reflect more on the city's overall operational financial health, including it as part of the general fund.
All right. Thank you. With that said, I'll entertain any motions to approve Resolution R 2022-020, authorizing Fund 615 to be considered part of the general fund for the purpose of financial reporting.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Swanberg.
Second.
Seconded, Councilmember Sullivan. Any comments, concerns? Otherwise, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Moving on to comments, reports, and items of appreciation. If you have something to share, community events, at this time, this is your chance to report. So Councilmember Huntington will
I've got
always lead
no
us off.
committee meetings I can think of, not till next month, I think. But I'd like to say welcome aboard, Mr. Roby, for your first full day as acting city administrator. You did a great job putting this meeting together. Thank you.
Councilmember Krogman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I may. Director Kuchera is with us also this evening. He's been advising, along with Communications Director Stacy, our ad hoc committee for selecting the city administrator. We have begun our work. This week we'll be conducting semi-finalist interviews, and we want to make sure we're clear. Our original plan as a council was to interview finalists and make a selection, if possible, next Monday evening, on April 18. We need to make sure everybody here the council members are available then. If we were to try to put that off another week to our regular council meeting, it may be difficult because of the number of items and what we have on the agenda for then. We believe we'll be prepared to present finalist candidates to you next Monday. If there's some glitch in that, we would let you know. So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, if you want to poll the.
Sure.
So make sure we're all available next Monday.
And this final decision for our city administrator will be a decision that will be made by all of us. And so with that said, would everybody be able to meet next Monday at 6:30?
What are we looking at for a time frame?
We'd start at the regular time, if I believe.
I said
And
6:30.
then it depends on how many candidates we have. But that would be all we'd be doing. We'd be interviewing them and we'd be having our discussion and voting. I would say
Hour and a half,
or two, at the most two.
hour and a
perhaps.
half.
15 minutes.
No, it'd be longer than that, but so.
I'm
Council member
available.
available. Councilmember Swanberg, you okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if we then, we will proceed as a council with the plan. If there's any problems or glitches, we'll let people know, but the weather by then should clear up apparently later this week. It won't be that way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
And that's all you have to report? Okay. Councilmember Schluter.
Since the last meeting, I did have a Sueur County officials meeting in Kilkenny. County Assessor Shane Bender presented information on assessment policies, regulations, and movement over the past year. I was able to sit down with Interim Administrator Roby and go over some of those items. If the rest of you had any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. There is a Highway 169 meeting going on right now in St. Peter, so I'm not able to attend it. They're having an open house and informational meeting on the project that's going on in St. Peter. Activity coming up before the next meeting. There's a Region 9 full board meeting Wednesday, and I also have an HRA meeting coming up on the 19th.
Thank you. Councilmember Sullivan.
Nothing to report tonight, Mayor.
Nothing tonight. Okay. Councilmember Swanberg.
Nothing tonight.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything myself other than I want to thank the Boy Scout Troop 9328 again for their presence here tonight. I also want to remind all of you, they're a wonderful resource to have in our community, the scouting program. As they move up through the ranks and they enter the Eagle Scout rank, they need to do a service project. And sometimes these service projects can be pretty intense and they can be very, very helpful to our community. So I hope that their group and their troop continues to prosper and again, thank them for coming in. And that's all I have. Interim City Administrator Roby, do you have anything you want to share with us?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only item that I would like to just touch on briefly is we had a very good, but I think successful turnout to our CASA 36 open house last Wednesday. Thank you, Wednesday. We had approximately 20 members of the public at the meeting, and City Engineer Corey Beanfang gave a nice presentation about the status of that project, which will be kicking off before we know it, effectively as soon as the weather clears up. SM Henchus, the general contractor, is itching to get some buckets in the ground. It's laid out in a very delicately, with lots of consideration to local businesses as well as residential properties. There's a website that members of the public can reference with contact information for Bolton and Menk. Of course, they can always stop into City Hall if they have questions, and we can, if we don't have the answers, we'll find them. But staging for this project will begin as early as the week of the 18th, which is next week, with ideally construction beginning the week of the 25th. And moving through several stages. So that's the only thing I want to update on. I appreciate everyone's time and those who came out and asked questions.
Thank you. And I want to wish everybody a happy Easter and a good Holy Week. And we will see you all Monday night at 6:30 then. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good.